coronavirus and developments from the beginning of the appearance until today. The stages of development of treatment against COVID-19 are divided into the following stages. 1. Pre-clinical phase. It is a stage where human trials have not yet been completed, and this stage has more than 125 institutions, companies, hospitals and an international university. 2. The first stage. It is the stage of testing the safety of vaccines and determining the dose, and at this stage 14 institutions, companies, hospitals and an international university have arrived at this stage. 3. The second stage. It is the stage of expansion in the safety testing for vaccines, and in this stage 11 institutions, companies, hospitals and an international university. 4. The third stage. It is the stage of testing the effectiveness of vaccines on a large scale, and in this stage 3 international institutions. 5. The fourth stage. It is the stage of adopting vaccines for limited use, and in this stage 1 is an international institution. Huge efforts from researchers around the world. Researchers around the world are developing more than 145 vaccines against coronavirus, and 20 vaccines are in human trials. Vaccines usually require years of research and testing before arriving at the clinic, but scientists are racing to produce a safe and effective vaccine by next year. Work began in January with the decoding of the SARS-CoV-2 genome, CoV-2. The first human safety vaccine trials began in March, but the path ahead is still uncertain. Some experiments will fail, and others may end without a clear result. But few may work to stimulate the immune system to produce effective antibodies against the virus. Human experiments. Below is the status of all vaccines that have reached human trials, along with a selection of promising vaccines that are still being tested in cells or animals. The vaccine testing process. The vaccine development course, from the lab to the clinic. Pre-clinical testing. Scientists give the vaccine to animals such as mice or monkeys to see if it produces an immune response. The first stage safety experiments. Scientists are administering the vaccine to a small number of people to test safety and dosage as well as to ensure that it stimulates the immune system. Stage 2 extended experiences. Scientists are giving the vaccine to hundreds of people who have split into groups, such as children and the elderly, to see if the vaccine works differently in it. These trials also test the safety of the vaccine and its ability to stimulate the immune system. Stage 3 proficiency testing. Scientists give the vaccine to thousands of people and wait to see how many people are infected, compared to volunteers who received placebo. These experiments can determine whether the vaccine protects against coronavirus. Approval. Regulators in each country review the results of the experiment and decide whether or not to agree to the vaccine. During an epidemic, the vaccine may obtain a permit to use the emergency before obtaining formal approval. Warp Speed. The U.S. government's Warp Speed operation program is expected to name 5 or more vaccine projects to receive billions of dollars in federal funding before there is evidence that vaccines are working. We will update the tracker and name Warp Speed projects when there is an official announcement. Compound stages. Another way to accelerate vaccine development is to combine stages. Some coronavirus vaccines are now in first or second stage trials, for example, where they are first tested in hundreds of people. The second phase. Moderna's vaccine dazzled the stock market in May with first stage data for just 8 people, only to see its share price drop when experts reacted half-heartedly to the results. The messenger vaccine RNA, mRNA for short, is used to produce viral proteins. The American company is looking forward to Phase 3 trials in July and hopes that vaccine doses will be ready by early 2021. The first stage. The second stage. The German company BioNTech has partnered with New York-based Pfizer and the Chinese pharmaceutical industry Fosun Pharma to develop their mRNA vaccine. On July 1, they announced that all volunteers in their first or second stage trial produced antibodies against SARS-CoV-2, while some experienced moderate side effects such as sleep disturbances and inflammation in the arms. In an interview, Pfizer CEO said he hoped his company would start delivering vaccines in October, delivering hundreds of millions of doses by the end of 2020, then up to 1 billion by the end of 2021. On June 30, the American company Inovio announced that it had temporary first-stage data on its DNA-based vaccine. They found no serious negative effects, and measured the immune response in 34 out of 36 volunteers. They are planning to start the second, third phase experiences this summer. Researchers at Imperial College London have developed a self-amplification vaccine, which boosts the production of a viral protein to stimulate the immune system. They started their first per second stage trials on June 15, and partnered with Morningside Ventures to manufacture and distribute the vaccine through a new company called VacEquity Global Health. On June 30, Japanese biotechnology company ANJ announced that it had started safety trials on a DNA-based vaccine, developed in partnership with the University of Osaka and Takara Bio. The first stage. In March, the Trump administration unsuccessfully tried to lure CureVac to transfer its research from Germany to the United States. In June, the company launched the first stage trials of the mRNA vaccine. The company said its German facilities could make hundreds of millions of doses of vaccine a year. The first stage. Korean company Genexine began testing the safety of the DNA-based vaccine in June. They expect to move on to Phase 2 experiences in the fall. The first stage. In June, Chinese researchers at the Academy of Military Medical Sciences, Suzhou Abujan Bioscience and Fax Biotechnology announced that they would begin their country's first safety experiments on a mRNA vaccine, called ARCOV. Previous studies on monkeys have reportedly shown protective effects. My work. French drug company Sanofi is developing an mRNA vaccine in partnership with Translate Bio. On June 23, they announced that they were planning experiments for the first stage in the fall. Viral vaccines. Vaccines that use the virus to transfer coronavirus genes into cells and elicit an immune response. The second stage, the third stage. A vaccine under development by the British-Swedish company AstraZeneca and the University of Oxford relies on a chimp insidious virus called ChAdOx1. The vaccine is in second, third stage trials in England and third stage trials in Brazil and South Africa. The project may provide emergency vaccines by October. In June, AstraZeneca said that its total production capacity is 2 billion doses. Second stage limited approval. The Chinese company CanSino Biologics has developed a vaccine based on adenovirus called Ad5, in partnership with the Institute of Biology at the country's Academy of Military Medical Sciences. In May, they released promising results from the first stage safety experiment. Unpublished data from Phase 2 trials showed that the vaccine produced a strong immune response, prompting the Chinese army to approve it on June 25 for a year as a particularly wanted drug. CanSino did not say whether the vaccination was mandatory or optional for soldiers. The first stage. The Aesthetic Research Institute, part of the Russian Ministry of Health, launched the experiment of the first stage of the vaccine they call GAM-COVID-VAC-LEO in June. It is a mixture of two adenoviruses, Ad5 and Ad26, designed with the coronavirus gene. Practical experiences. Researchers at the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Boston are testing an adenovirus called Ad26 in monkeys. Johnson & Johnson announced in June that it will begin Phase 1/2 trials in late July. The Swiss company Novartis will manufacture a gene-based vaccine developed by the Massachusetts Eye and Ear Hospital. A virus called a gland-linked virus introduces the genetic fragments of the coronavirus into cells. The first stage trials are scheduled to start in late 2020. The American company Merck announced in May that it will develop a vaccine for vesicular stomatitis, the same approach it has successfully used to produce the only approved vaccine for the Ebola virus. And partnership with IAVI. Merck is also working with Themis Bioscience, an Austrian company it acquires, to develop a second vaccine, which will use the measles virus to transfer genetics into the cells of patients. Vaxart vaccine is an oral tablet containing an adenovirus that transmits coronavirus genes. They are preparing for first-stage experiences this summer. Protein-based vaccines. It is vaccines that use coronavirus or part of a protein to trigger an immune response. The first stage, the second stage. In May, Novavax, Maryland-based, began testing the first per second stage of a vaccine made up of microscopic particles carrying fragments of coronavirus. The Consortium for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations is investing $384 million in the project. The first stage. Clover Biopharm Pharmaceuticals developed a coronavirus protein vaccine. To further stimulate the immune system, the vaccine is given in conjunction with the so-called aid produced by British drug company GSK and American company Dynavax. In June, Anhui Zhifei Longcom began experiments with the first stage in China of a vaccine consisting of a mixture of viral proteins and an adjuvant that stimulates the immune system. The company is part of Chongqing Zhifei Biological Products and has a partnership with the Chinese Academy of Medical Sciences. Australian Vaccine launched the first stage experience in July. Their vaccine combines viral proteins and an adjuvant that stimulates immune cells. Practical experiences. After the SARS epidemic in 2002, Baylor College of Medicine researchers began developing a vaccine that could prevent a new outbreak. Despite promising early results, research support has disappeared. Since the coronavirus that causes SARS and COVID-19 is very similar, researchers are reviving the project in partnership with Texas Children's Hospital. A vaccine under development by the University of Pittsburgh, called PitCovac, is a skin patch filled with 400 tiny needles made of sugar. When placed on the skin, the needles dissolve and the virus proteins enter the body. A vaccine from the University of Australian Queensland provides modified viral proteins to attract a stronger immune response. In June, the university and CSL announced a partnership to start Stage 1 trials, which could lead to millions of doses annually starting in 2021. GSK is providing an auxiliary substance to further stimulate the immune system. In addition to their mRNA vaccine, Sanofi is developing a vaccine based on viral proteins. They produce proteins with engineered viruses that grow inside insect cells. GSK will complement these proteins with aids that stimulate the immune system. Sanofi said it could produce at least 600 million doses annually if the vaccine was successful in the experiments. Complete vaccines. Vaccines that use a weak or inactivated copy of the coronavirus to provoke an immune response. Third level. After promises of an early test, the Chinese state-owned company, Sinopharm, announced in June that it would move on to Phase 3 trials. They reached an agreement with the United Arab Emirates to start testing the efficacy of an inactivated vaccine in the Emirates. The second phase. Researchers at the Institute of Medical Biology of the Chinese Academy of Medical Sciences, which invented vaccines against polio and viral hepatitis, began testing the second stage of a virus-inactivated vaccine in June. The first stage, the second stage. The Chinese private company Sinovac Biotech is testing a broken vaccine called CoronaVac. On June 13, the company announced that first per second stage experiments on 743 volunteers did not find severe negative effects and produced an immune response. Sinovac prepares Phase 3 experiments in China and Brazil and builds a facility to manufacture up to 100 million doses annually. The first stage, the second stage. In cooperation with the Indian Council for Medical Research and the National Institute of Viruses, the Indian company Bharat Biotech has designed a vaccine called Covaxin. It is the inert rabies virus designed to carry proteins from the coronavirus. The first per second phase trials are scheduled to start this month. Reused vaccines. Vaccines already used for other diseases that may also protect COVID-19. Third level. The Bacillus Calmette-Guérin vaccine was developed in the early 20th century as a protection against tuberculosis. The Marduk Children's Research Institute in Australia is piloting the third stage, and there are many other experiments underway to see if the vaccine is partially protected against coronavirus.